book launch of The Lives and Times of HRH by Herman Ronald Hochstadt, proudly published by NUS Press. This event is brought to you by NUS Press and NUS Libraries, and with the help of a number of friends and former colleagues of HRH's, some of whom you'll meet during this presentation. Herman Ronald Hochstadt was one of that generation who built Singapore, who made our island city-state a success at a time when it was, starting at a time when it was by no means certain that we would be one. The book is titled The Lives and Times of HRH, and that's for a reason. Think of the amount of change that took place during the lifetime of HRH. As a young boy, he was going to school at the Ceylon Road Boys' School just around the corner from here. It was during the Japanese occupation. He was singing the Japanese national anthem in the mornings, pledging allegiance to the Emperor of Japan. It was a very different world. But things changed. Soon after that, a schoolboy would be singing God Save the King. Then it was God Save the Queen. Finally, Majulah Singapura. But a few years later, things changed again, and it was Negara Ku. Singapore was part of Malaysia. By 1965, HRH had long left school. He'd graduated from the University of Malaya. He joined the Singapore Civil Service and actually was working for Lee Kuan Yew as his secretary during all of this exciting period. Then we're about a third of the way into the book. So it just gives you a range of some of the stories that you will find in the book. Royalties for the book will be donated to the Hochstadt NUS Bursary Endowment Fund. So it's for a good cause. So what's our rundown? Okay, after I finish, which will be soon, I promise, we'll have a video presentation, and that video will be the launch moment for the book. The book will be launched. After the video, ordinarily, in such events, we'd have a Q&A where we could all ask questions of HRH. Well, we can't quite do that. We can't quite be in the same room, but we've enlisted the help of a very talented journalist, Michelle Martin, who's with Money FM, SPH Radio, and she'll ask HRH some of the questions that I'm sure you have about the book, about his life. Thank you very much, Michelle, for helping us out. After Michelle and HRH have been able to talk, then we'll have a message from the NUS University librarian, Lee Cheng-yen. Cheng-yen was for several years a colleague of HRH's late wife, Peggy Leong Wai-chi Hochstadt. After Cheng-yen has had a chance to talk, then there'll be memories from a number of HRH's colleagues, former colleagues, and they'll talk about the impact that he had on Singapore, on our society, civil service, government, but also about the impact on their own lives. So without further ado, the book.
Well, thank you and congratulations on your book. I'm going to start at a doorway that I think helps us understand a lot about a book, and that is a book's title. So most of us have one life, but you refer to your lives in plural. The title is Lives and Times of HRH. I wonder if you can explain the word choice.
Yes, I think it's actually explained inside in the preface that I was trying to be persuaded for some time to come up with some autobiography or biography, and I had never kept any records because I could not keep any records. So with an autobiography or biography, you would need the proper records. So left it at that. Then later on, someone suggested how about a memoir? You don't need to go to actually formal records, just from memory, which can be accurate and might be accurate. And I thought about it, but then there are so many different sort of lives I led in my life, doing so many different things. Nothing very too much or not important, but so many things. So then they said the memoir could not be just about one life, it would have to be about several lives. And
Interesting.
It took place at different times in the history of Singapore. So that's how it came about.
You write the 30 or so years of my government service, or servitude, as some of my friends were ought to proclaim. They ran, at times sprinted, from 1959. So you retired in 1989, 3 months before you turned 56. So why write and release your memoirs after you've been hassled to do so? Why did you finally cave in? And why is it happening now in 2020?
Well, if you want to have any sort of memoir, as I persuaded to do, yes, better be done before you leave this world.
Best be done then, yeah.
And I was already getting on age, now 87. So when I started it was probably about 85, 86. So it was already quite late in life. Had to be done, but then otherwise you'll never get done.
As you mentioned, you took no notes during your years as a pioneering senior civil servant.
No, because so many jobs I had that, it made it very difficult to keep notes because you kept the records. You might run into foul of the Official Secrets Act.
Yes.
So I could not keep any notes. So I never did. So entirely out of memory. And when it came to my age, memory keeps getting worse and worse as time goes on. So if
well, now that you've done it, would you have taken up the offer of a ghostwriter? I know you turned down the offer of a ghostwriter, but now that you've completed the book and you look back, what have you learned of yourself or of writing in the process?
Well, writing itself, in the course of my government service, one of the things that you have to do quite a lot of is minute writing. So you get very used to that minute writing, and a lot of it is done. And when you work with someone like, for the Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew, at those early days, and even Dr. Keng Swee, they want the minutes of meetings, that you keep minutes, you want the minutes of meetings within 24 hours, so you have to be pretty sharp about it.
Got to be no time for lagging, that's for sure.
No. Anything, well, some of them should say that anything longer than that, you better send it to the National Archives because they're the only ones who want it.
So you had training in terms of speed writing, but still it took you a couple of years for this book, yeah? Like 4 years?
To writing in the book?
Yes, how long did it take?
No, actually it took about a year, just over about a year.
When that's speed writing for a memoir.
I got down to it on the laptop, and which was not too easy because I'm not very familiar with all that modern technology. So I kind of keep going, get stuck all of the way. And finally came out.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the heart and soul of the book. You joined the Singapore Administrative Service in 1959. So you saw Singapore through key transitions in your years of service. Singapore as colony of the UK, internally independent state of Singapore, Singapore as part of the newly created Malaysia, onto 1965 when you write, Singapore popped out of Malaysia like a champagne cork, then onto the Sovereign Republic of Singapore. The historical span of time during which you write about is significant in terms of Singapore's history. I wonder if you can share a little of the key transitions in the civil service that come to mind when you think of an institution that ushered Singapore through so much change.
Oh, that's
That's a big one.
That's a lifetime job.
Takes a book.
Yeah, but I think the fastest transition and most momentous was actually the years I worked with the Prime Minister and Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, so 1960 to 65, because that's before Singapore went into Malaysia. When he went into Malaysia, during Malaysia time, and when he came out, and that was compressed within about 3 years, less than 3 years. So it's very compressed.
So that is the period of time that sticks with you the most?
That's the time that either kill you or bake you.
Now, when it comes to your CV, even an abbreviated one, which just lists your bare appointments, runs into 4 pages of this book. I think that's a really telling snapshot of the huge breadth of your experience in public service, and also how massive and diverse an organization the Singapore Public Service really is. Personally, how did you approach the very many movements, the job postings, MAS, Ministries of Comms, Ministry of Education? You faced different expectations, I'm sure. Was there ever a time when permanent secretary meant permanence in your mind? Was there a time when you hoped for more permanence, for depth of experience?
Oh, I don't know how to answer that. But permanent secretary until 1959 meant permanent secretary, but from the 59 onwards was never permanent anymore. You just secretary and see how it goes.
So why didn't you think that you were up to the task when you were asked to move to, and you write this, solve the mystery of education?
Well, to be quite honest, when I was asked to go to education, I was asked to go by the chairman of the Public Service Commission, Mr. Tan Teck Chui then. And I told him quite honestly, I said, I don't think I'm up to the task because, I think it's out of my depth. For one thing, Chinese education, I'm not familiar with Chinese, so it's very difficult for me. But he said, don't worry, I've specially selected you, recommended you, and I'm sending a team with you. So there'll be 4 of you there. So you can do the job. So I just went in.
The Rolling Stone, that approach of a rolling stone gathers no moss.
Yeah, the moss gets lost on the way.
Personally, though, help us understand your mindset. How did you prepare for change in your life?
You're born into change. If you look at my life, it went through Singapore under British administration, then came the war, Japanese occupation, out of the war, back to the British administration, and as I mentioned in the book, you sing "God Save the King" and salute the Union Jack. Then you sing "God Save the Queen" and salute the Union Jack. And then you go into the Malaysian national anthem, and then Majulah Singapura, and then where are you now?
That's a lot of national anthems.
You can't adjust to it, then you just don't survive, that's all.
So given the sweep of your 30-year career, I'm sure you needed to engage with many different segments of people. So still on that theme of change, the book gives us a whole different layer of understanding of how Singapore transformed, really through the role of the public service and what it's done. So you saw us move through so much, with recovery ahead still uncertain in this, post-COVID world. Do you think Singapore's civil service will have to change to meet new challenges or do things in new ways?
I think it has to. The Singapore civil service can't change to meet the challenges. Then there's no administration. There's no administration, there's no bureaucracy, and there's no no government. And you have to, well, I think the COVID-19 now is going to change a lot of the world, not only for Singapore, but for the world itself. So we have to try and see how best we can survive through that.
What do you think are going to be some of the key changes? I mean, we've heard that Singapore is going to have to deal with a world that's less open to globalization, for example, and that's a key pillar on which we've built our growth.
Well, I think if you go back to the history of Singapore, during my time there, you know, in the earlier days, we had to say, we got Malaysia forever. We go with Malaysia, and you say, can't survive without Malaysia. We must go to Malaysia because to survive. Then suddenly, one day you wake up and say, if we are no more in Malaysia, we are on our own, and we don't know what our own is. You know, so you have to try and figure out how to move next, what to do, and how to get on with it. If you don't, as you know, as in fact, the PM Lee Kuan used to tell me those days, you know, you have to, you look for survivors, working for our own survival, for the survival of the country, your own survival. You just can't stay still and do nothing.
Figured it out as you went along. Was that his mindset?
Well, you had to. If you didn't go along, you wouldn't be here, right?
All right, let's talk a little bit about your university time. You joined the Singapore administration in 1959 after graduating with a Bachelor of Arts honors in philosophy from University of Malaya. Now, at university, you were part of the University of Malaya's Socialist Club. Other members included our late President S.R. Nathan and academic Wang Gungwu. So the club was meant to propagate socialist thought and study means of unity in the Federation. Can you describe your experience in this club, what you were trying to do, and also your experience getting a certain publication called Fajar published again?
Well, actually, my connection with actually being in the club, I was a member for some time, but to actually get onto the Central Working Committee then, I was actually persuaded by a friend of mine, Radha Lolan, who mentioned the book, who was sort of referred to as a socialist. And he is the one who persuaded me to take on the job on the Central Working Committee of Social Club because they wanted a publication secretary. And the Fajar, the publication earlier had been proscribed, and he felt, and he persuaded me to think the same way that I had done just about then, jointly with another friend of mine, Lloyd Fernando, who became professor in English literature at the University of Malaya, Kuala Lumpur, to start a magazine called Write, W-R-I-T. We founded it, we funded it, and it was running for some time, and we managed to get the approval from the special branch to go to this publication. So we felt that since I was the joint editor of that publication, I should be able to persuade special branch a good enough person to qualify Fajar for a renewal of his license. So we tried, but it didn't succeed. It turned out.
Could you remind us again why it wasn't successful?
I don't know. I went personally to see the gentleman in the special branch called Mr. Knott. He was then the archivist. And he said, you know, that was so important about the Fajar. No one's livelihood, no one depends on it. You know, so why do you need to get that out? And they just left it there.
Did it signal to you the sort of danger associated with
I don't know. Then
ideology or?
No, I was only one year on the Central Working Committee of Social Club. The following year, I didn't continue. I left because I was leaving the university then, so I didn't continue. And a friend of mine became the publication secretary, and for some reason they gave the license back. I don't know why. Not maybe
okay,
because.
Well, what are your theories?
I don't know. But the Fajar was never the same again after that, anyway.
All right. The PAP was founded around the time that you did enter university.
PAP,
did you have any?
Sorry,
Did you
PPA
have,
found 1954, I think.
so you
No,
graduated, you joined.
I was in the university then, couple of years or so. But some of my friends from the university, they went for the inaugural meeting at the Victoria Memorial Hall.
Did you have any interaction with PAP's founding figures then?
No, not at all.
And at the time, did you think this is going to be the dominant political party for years to come?
It seemed to be very, very active, with a lot of support, and seemed to be growing as time went on.
What did you think of it? I mean,
So think of it.
at the time.
I think nothing special. That there was a very, very strong party, and you had a lot of support from the ground level, and that it might do very well.
And this is the party whose policies you would help support for your entire life, yeah?
That was later in 1959 when I joined.
So in school, you studied philosophy, English literature, pure mathematics at university. When you look back, do you think that what you studied in university was useful at all in terms of applicability at work?
I think no direct relevance, but indirectly, yes, because I think anything, if you study, go into it enough, helps you to think, how to think, how to go through. So, which, in the real world, practical world, if you can't think, then you can't get anything done. So you have to think. So in that sense, yes, but indirect relevance, like say law or accountancy, engineering, doesn't have direct relevance.
Your memoir, Life and Times of HRH, unfolds, and it's very interesting reading the narrative of your life story. So I want to move from your days at university to your early days in the civil service. So you're taking over from the British colonial civil servants, for one. How were they in terms of attitude of handing over their duties to Singaporeans or Malayan civil servants who were essentially taking over their job?
Well, when I joined, actually, there were really only two very senior British civil servants left in Singapore in the government. One was Tony Colton, who was in my finance ministry when I joined. He was one of my bosses there, deputy secretary, who later became personnel manager of Straits Times Group. He was there, so I worked directly with him. And the other one was Mr. Val Meadows, who became deputy secretary in the Prime Minister's office, Lee Kuan Yew's office. So they were the only two. So I only had more direct release with Colton. Val Meadows very indirectly. But no, I didn't find any problems with them.
They were cordial.
Oh yes, but in fact, Tony Colton, who was indirectly one of my senior bosses there, was very nice. And I was asked when I joined the Ministry of Finance by immediate boss to sort of understudy him, to get to learn from him how to do the implementation of the disbandment of the city council, absorption of the employees into the government service. He had been working on it for some time, and he was due to leave an organization. So my boss asked me to try, and so I went asked Colton for a briefing to tell me all about it. He's very nice about it. He says, well, I'm very busy now, but how about to join me in the office on a Sunday morning? He can give you a briefing and we go through the whole thing. So he did. He was very nice about it. He told me everything, handed me the papers and the files. He even took me for lunch at a nearby restaurant and had a couple of beers and went back and then left it to me and said, okay, he said, now your job, take it over.
Best kind of working lunch, really. Well, speaking of bosses, many of your colleagues and who are other esteemed senior civil servants are going to be watching this, celebrating your book launch with you. But so will the casual reader who is probably interested in some of the well-known figures that you worked for. So you worked for both Dr. Goh Keng Swee, our second Deputy Prime Minister from 1973 to 1985, and Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew. How did you handle instances at work when you may have disagreed with both Dr. Goh or Mr. Lee Kuan Yew?
Well, actually, when I worked for Dr. Goh, he was not Deputy Prime Minister, he was Finance Minister, and also one time Minister of Defense. I worked for the Defense. Uh, I think the times and circumstances I worked for both of them were very, very different. More often and I mean much more than Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, I worked for Dr. Goh. Dr. Goh, with Finance Ministry, then later in Interior and Defense, then later back in Finance Ministry, for several times. For PM Lee Kuan Yew was essentially just one period from 1962 to 1965. That's a period of time, tremendous transition for Singapore, very, very difficult times. And he was also very young, very impatient, So working for him under those circumstances is quite different. In fact, much later, and I also worked fairly directly on him and the Ministry of Education. He was quite a changed person. His whole personality, much more patient, much more ready to listen. So, there are different people working for both of them at different times under different circumstances. We're working for different people. Very hard to compare.
I get that. Yeah. But how did they handle pushback or disagreements? Or I'm sure that you never saw eye to eye on everything.
Well, I was not as tall as Lee Kuan Yew, so I couldn't see eye to eye with him. And I think a little taller than Dr. Goh, so also couldn't see eye to eye with him.
Well, you're very witty and very charming getting out of that question. Who did you prefer to work for? Would it be Dr. Goh Keng Swee or Mr. Lee Kuan Yew?
The times and circumstances are very different. Dr. Goh, for one thing about him, he's got a tremendous imagination. People don't believe it. A tremendous imagination. A lot of things. The bird park at Jurong, for instance, was his idea, to bring in living population into Jurong, because it was at first when Jurong first started, it was just factories and factories and factories, and
right.
Even the transportation system couldn't cope with the workers going in and coming out every day, and they had to have lorries were hired to transport workers in the morning, take them to work and take them out. So he felt, plus others felt, that you needed to have a stable population living in Jurong to serve the factories there and work there, and have the families there, schools should be there. And said having a bird park there was one sort of attraction for make it more lively. And when he said that, he said, well, one day I met a friend of mine who from university who was then working for EDB, and I met him in the corridor of the Ministry of Finance, where I was the fifth floor. Was walking towards Dr. Goh's office. I was coming out. He was just going in. So I said, "Hey, what are you doing here?" He said, "I'm going to see Dr. Goh." I said, "Why?" He wants to see me. He wants to see my plans for the waterfall. I said, "What waterfall?" He says, "The bird park. He wants to have a waterfall there. He wants to have a bird park and has a waterfall there." I said, "Whose idea is that?" He said, "I don't know from where he got the idea, but I've got to work it out." So this is, even the zoo was also Dr. Goh's idea. Symphony orchestra was Dr. Goh's idea.
Wow.
So he a man of great ideas.
Yeah, great vision, great vision. Now you mentioned in an interview that I listened to that once as secretary to PM Lee, you did not do something, and he retorted, "After 6 months, you can't read my mind." So I wonder, what are some of your most memorable recollections as secretary to PM Lee Kuan Yew?
Everything. It'll take a whole book to write that, to answer that. But well, on the instance that you mentioned, happened that there's a time of great pressure, tremendous pressure. Things are happening every day. If it's going to Malaysia, coming, all the rest of it, and after a lot of this sort of pressure, the strain was too much. So one day after office, I went home and just typed out a letter of resignation. The next day I said it in, you know. He didn't go to office that day because he had been working very hard earlier the previous day, and that evening he had to attend a function. So the secretary, his PA, took my letter and handed it to him. Then later he asked me about that. I said, let's talk about it in office tomorrow. And then next day when he came, he said, what was all this about? And I said, strain became too much for me. I can't take it anymore. He said, what strain you're talking about? Don't you think I should have more strain than you?
Oh,
but we said we just can't give up like that. We have to do our best to survive ourselves, for Singapore to survive. And, that's it.
So why did you try to resign? What strain were you under? Tell us.
It was just the pressure of the work, the strain, things happening all the time, and just that's about it.
And you never tried to resign again?
I left at least one time. I went to work for Straits Times. My old boss, Tony Colton, was the personnel manager. He had asked me to go to Straits Times. I joined, and then I resigned. I went there, and I was there for about a week. And when after that a week, then I was asked to go to Lee Kuan Yew's office, PM Lee Kuan Yew, go to his office to see him, Vice Secretary, because apparently he was away when I resigned and left.
Yeah.
And when he came back, he was told by Dr. To Chin Chai that I had resigned, and Dr. To Chin Chai, Deputy Prime Minister, has said that I should do he should do what he could to get me to come back. And so he spoke to me and asked me to go to join and come back. So I did.
I'm glad you did.
And
got a lot done.
Other time, also applied for. I was persuaded to apply for a personal job, and then Malaysia Singapore Airlines. If I want Singapore Airlines was just about starting. Malaysia Singapore Airlines. I applied for a personal job because the personal manager wanted to move on to some other job in the airline, and he could not, unless he could get a successor. And he was my senior in school, in St. Andrew's School. So he thought persuaded when I applied. And then I was sort of offered the job. And I went to see my boss in Ministry of Finance, Mr. Tan Chok Kian, to tell him that, what I wanted to do. I said I had to get this okay because the airline would not give me the job unless my living was approved. Right? No, there's no objection to my living, enjoying them. Then he told me nothing to do. You can go back to your work, and that's it.
Okay, so you tried more than once. I wonder, HRH, if you will be gracious enough to join me now in what I do with all the authors that I speak with. I put them through a speed round. So I'll ask a simple question and you can just give one line as an answer. Are you game?
Okay.
All right, let's go. Favorite place outside of Singapore that you've lived in?
Only Singapore. I've never really lived anywhere else.
Never lived anywhere else? You're High Commissioner anywhere?
I visited to study, but never really lived.
All right, let me amend that question. Favorite place outside Singapore to visit?
Visit? No favorite place. All are fine.
We're hearing the diplomacy, in your DNA here. All right, one word that you would like to use for people to describe you. One word.
Sincere.
All right. Favorite boss?
Favorite boss? Myself.
Least favorite boss?
Who?
Least favorite boss. And you can't repeat your answers.
Also myself.
Ah, there you go. That's not against the
rules. Two extremes of character.
Favorite thing about writing?
Writing. WRITING.
Yeah.
No favorite thing, but just something that you have to do.
Well, favorite books?
Favorite book. This one.
Natural
Lives and
Poem.
Times of HRH.
Oh my goodness. Favorite food?
Food. Favorite food. Roja.
Favorite child? No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Just kidding. Well, thanks for being a great sport. That was fun. You know, I read in your book, you include a speech that you gave as guest of honor at NUS, a dinner and dance. And you say you approached the speech from the perspective of writing minutes. It was a great speech, by the way. You know, it had so much more character than a lot of other speeches that I think should never see the light of day. It was really funny, and I'm sure it got a lot of laughs in the day. I enjoyed it a lot. You mentioned in the speech government instruction manuals and you know, the comfort of thinking and writing in minutes. So for people who want a view of what working in the civil service is really all about, was there space for creative ideating and collaborative thinking? Was your input ever sought on policies that you helped implement?
Yeah, there's a lot of interaction. And, you know, you get meetings. When I was in the Ministry of Finance during the budget, for instance, we used to hold, and this was actually started by my predecessor, Mr. George Bogas, when he was Permanent Secretary. The meetings with the senior Permanent Secretary and senior officers from different ministries discussing their budgets, you know, before we actually decided for the discuss to have to go through it. And this is something which was taught to me by George Bogas, who I think was a great guy, great leader, great civil servant, and it was very good. You know, they gave the opportunity to talk to this before putting up the budget for the year. Even if you don't give them everything they ask for, you know, at least there's a chance for them to explain and to emphasize what they think is more important than other things. You know, so it's just an exchange of ideas, which is very good for both
That's
parties.
great. Yeah, interesting. What, were you ever asked to implement policies that you wrestled with morally?
No. When you are a civil servant, you only have a moral to do what's required of you.
So you pretty much took on the values of the civil service, you know, integrity, and let that be your compass?
Yeah, I think it's a job. And that's also, this is something which my old boss, George Bogas, would say. Being a senior civil servant, it's not a job, not a profession. It's a calling. It's like a religion.
Yeah, yeah. Well, speaking of things that are close to you, I know that your grandfather founded Singapore Casket. Did you ever help out in the family business when you were growing up?
Not directly. In fact, my father was the only son, living son at that time, and he had no inclination, no liking to go into the same business. Although they was thought that he would succeed to go in, he never did. He wanted to become a teacher, which he did from a very young. Once he graduated from school, at St. Andrews, St. Joseph's School, when he finished off, he became a normal trained teacher. Started training at the age of about, I think, I was about 16 or 17 only. He started, and immediately went to. He was taught. I think there's a Malay school, Kota Raja Malay School. He became a teacher there. So some of his students were older than him. You know, so this is what he wanted to do, and he did that through his whole life.
Did you get a sense that your parents or your family expected you to do anything in particular?
No, I don't think so. That he left it to me to do what I want to do, and that I never thought I'd ever join the Singapore Casting Company, become into. But you know, one of the university long vacations, when I had some time in my hands and wanted to earn some money, you know, I asked whether I could work there for the 2 to 3 months as a assistant manager, and my grandfather was no more around then, but my uncle was then the managing director of the company. He said, "Okay, you come in," and so I went there and learned the job as to, you know, supervising at funerals, doing all the kind of things, and for the money. Yeah. But after that 3 months or so, I went back to university. No inclination.
No, okay. Well, you belong to a tiny ethnic minority Eurasian community, proudly taking up 0.4% of the population in 2015. Nevertheless, it's produced a number of greats: President Benjamin Shears, Law Minister Eddie Barker, 3 permanent secretaries, including your good self. What are your hopes for the community in Singapore?
Well, I hope the community can be more cohesive and do more for Singapore as a community itself, as a member of the community, because the Singapore Eurasian population has got the DNA of the entire population of Singapore, the European side and the Asian side, and the Eurasian Association has done a lot, So the way of working together in the community, getting on, is something that should push more for Singapore as a whole to so not necessarily emulate, but to accept this as a really part of the community.
So this is my final question for you today as we celebrate your book launch. Over a 30-year career, you've had so many highlights. You implemented government decisions for equal pay for female civil servants. At the Ministry of Interior and Defense, you helped build the ministry and our armed forces. At the Ministry of Education, you made weekly visits to hear principals and teachers and to formulate the policies that would build our education system. Tommy Koh, in his preface says, "It is due to leaders like you that Singapore has enjoyed fiscal prudence." And we know that fiscal prudence is a big part of why we have the reserves to draw down on a year where we need to for an extraordinary budget to save jobs and save lives. So how would you like to best be remembered in terms of your contribution to Singapore and as a person?
I think just summarize it. It's all inside the book. Buy the book, read it, and you'll know.
All right. Well, that's a great plug for the book. It's a real pleasure meeting you, and thank you for this interview.
Thank you. Thank you.
When Ajit Prasad suggested that NUS Libraries be a part of this project sometime at the end of 2017, we naturally jumped at it. At the University Library, we are well used to purchasing books for the diverse NUS community. However, to partner an author and publisher and to see a book morph from manuscript to its final print form would be a wholly new and unique experience for us. This was a great opportunity for the library. But what was more compelling was that we have a long connection with the Hochstadt family. The late Mrs. Peggy Hochstadt was the first chief librarian of NUS. When I joined NUS Libraries in 1981 as a trainee librarian, I was inspired by her work, her warmth, and her guidance. I worked with her closely when I was a young rookie. As the secretary of an organizing committee for a conference, the mistress of ceremony for the official launch of the Hon Swee San Memorial Library, and a host of other projects. She was there for me and taught me how to handle difficult times. Our walk with Mr. Hochstadt started in July 2013, when he found a hardbound copy of his address he had given to the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences annual dinner on 29th January 1988, which the late Mrs. Peggy Hochstadt, to quote the words of HRH, who at that time got it bound in typical librarian fashion. That find led the Hochstadt family to donate rare finds from the late Mrs. Hochstadt's book collection and the setting up of the Peggy Y. Chi Leong Hochstadt Endowment Fund. Now turning our attention to the birth of Lives and Times of HRH, his memoirs. In January 2018, we started discussing the contract with NUS Press, and the proceeds of the sale of the memoir will go to the Hochstadt NUS Bursary Fund to support deserving and needy undergraduates. When I first saw the finished product and the advanced review copies, I was really overjoyed. At last, the book is ready. NUS Libraries is honored and proud to be part of this journey, to have Mr. Hochstadt tell his stories in his own unique ways, for readers to understand how a pioneer generation civil servant served the nation and helped shape it to where it is today. HRH, we wish you a belated 87th birthday and more good years ahead. Thank you for allowing us to be part of this journey.
Good morning, Mr. Hochstadt.
Public speaking and video recording are two skills that I never picked up from HRH.
Today, exactly 1 month after his 87th birthday, we are delighted to witness, albeit in cyberspace, the launch of HRH's memoirs.
HRH first came on the scene shortly after Singapore achieved internal independence as a state.
This ancient establishment list that I have lists HRH as number 23, very high up indeed.
In his initial tour of duty, HRH formulated and implemented the new government's policy of equal pay for female and male civil servants. And he also settled a nationwide strike by nights out collectors and other daily rated public cleansing workers. These early experiences reflect HRH's lifelong habit of working towards equitable outcomes and focus on cleaning up messes.
His public service contributions continued even after he retired from the civil service. He served as Singapore's first non-resident High Commissioner to South Africa and its surrounding countries. He was also a member of the Presidential Council on Minority Rights, as well as the Presidential Elections Committee. HRH also contributed to the corporate sector, serving on a number of company boards, including Neptune Orient Lines, NOL, and the Export Credit Insurance Company of Singapore, ECIX.
The culture of an organization depends on the person in charge, and our Mr. Hochstadt was firm, fair, friendly, and fun to work with. He taught us to write accurately and succinctly while capturing the essence of a discussion or a policy and its intent.
The work that we did under HRH's guidance in the first half of the 1980s laid a strong foundation that the Treasury of today has built on to effectively manage Singapore's public finances.
And it was a great opportunity for me to learn from you one-on-one about management and about administration. And I am eternally grateful to you for your tutelage.
I recall that one male colleague sent him a paper full of annexes. He flipped, flopped, and flipped as he read the paper, and exasperated wrote back, "I feel like a drake on a duck." We didn't always understand the poems, pantongs, and proverbs that Mr. Hochstadt dished out to us Philistines. We used to huddle in small groups, trying to unravel these remarks. What does boss want? Is he scolding us?
One day in early 1985, you asked me to come to your office in the Ministry of Finance. I was wondering why you called me in. Could it be that you were not very happy with one of my submissions? When I arrived, you told me that I was being posted to the Ministry of Law. You said that you yourself had been tasked with the responsibility of being PS Law concurrently with your appointment as PS Budget. I remember I was happy and I was honored.
HRH returned for its third and final tour of duty at the Treasury in late 1981 to succeed another legendary PermSec, George Edwin Bogas, who was retiring. GB had initiated a revamp of the government expenditure budgeting system, which had remained essentially unchanged since colonial days. HRH reviewed the rather limited progress that had been made in program. He summed up the work to be done in a memorable tagline: The challenge ahead is to transform budgeting from the realm of witchcraft to that of science.
I was particularly impressed, I would even say awestruck, by the good and easy relationship you had with the minister of the day, first Mr. E.W. Barker, and then Professor S. Jayakumar.
Elsie recalls that on one occasion, when she was late with the submission, Mr. Hochstadt wrote back, "Lembu sudah balik kampung." How much gentler and wittier can a reprimand be?
HRH has also been a wonderful friend, despite his seniority. HRH is the person who introduced me as a member to the cricket club and to his favorite whiskey, the Burong. HRH has always shown a genuine interest in those around him and in promoting fellowship. Whenever a discussion used to get very heated, HRH, in his inimitable style, used to interrupt and say, "Chotomate, chotomate."
I am grateful to you, and especially for what I learned from you under those months in the Ministry of Law.
More than a generation has passed since we worked with and learned from HRH. We are delighted that we continue to keep in touch through TCC gatherings and interactions in cyberspace.
Thank you for letting us have fun while we worked. We wish you happy birthday once again and congratulate you on the launch of your memoirs.
May I say that although you always write your name in small letters, you, to me, walk 6 foot tall.
Happy birthday to you.
Many more!